Let's call this meeting to order so we can burn through this, hopefully within an hour, right?
Yeah.
And, so we don't have any public comment, so we'll proceed with our business items, finance, and action items.
Good. Good morning, Dr. Randalls and committee members. The first action item on your agenda there is the purchasing agenda, and again, just some routine purchases that generally occur this time of year. If anyone has any specific questions on what's presented there.
I didn't have any particular questions, did either of you?
Or through it.
Yeah. Yep.
All million pages of it.
No questions. So I guess if we can get a motion to approve the purchase agenda.
So moved.
Support?
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, let's move on to
The second item there is related to a resolution to refund our 2007 refunding bonds. And actually, 2007 refunding bonds was a refunder of 2004 bonds. So this would be a second refunding. There's a little memo I provided in your packet. Interest rates continue to be low, as we all know, and it does benefit us as a debtor, if you will. So in discussions, and you may recall when we issued the new bonds back in March for the new construction, we refunded an earlier bond issue there. And so this is the same, basically, we're doing the same thing for the 2007 bonds. It'll save the district and our taxpayers $7.2 million in gross interest savings and $6.2 million on net present value basis. When you look to refund bonds, there is a state requirement that the net present value savings needs to be at least 3% in order to refund. Typically, we like to see it in the 5 to 6% range. The net present value, if we refund these bonds, based on the estimates now, the interest rates, it's about a 12% saving, which is very, very significant. So the timing would be probably in January sometime. The resolution that's attached will need to be approved by the full board. There's a lot of paperwork there. It's the same basic resolution that the board and you folks approved back in about a year ago for the new bonds and the refunding that we did in March. So what this committee needs to do is essentially approve this going to the board at their next meeting for their approval. As your CFO, I recommend we go forward with this. We would use Stiefel Nicholas as our lead underwriter again, with probably one or two other co-managers of the issue. So that's the nature of this action item. I don't know if anyone has any questions on it.
Any questions? What bond was it that we refunded in March then?
It was I think it was another 2007.
Okay.
This 2007 was only a portion refunding the 2004. Much like, it gets a little complicated, much like our current bonds, the 2004 issue, which I believe was $165 million, we also issued in two tranches. So this was the first refunding. What we did back in March was a refunding of the second tranche of those. Okay. So at this point, once we do this, all prior bond issues will have been refunded at least once. And then the one we just refunded in March, we would have an opportunity several years down the road, if interest rates are still favorable, to look at that again. And our 2016 bonds, the new ones we issued, we will also take a look at those at their first call date, which I believe is about 8 years out. So, so we, in as much as those that are savers, the interest rates, low interest rates are not good. For those of us that are debtors, like the school district, it's certainly favorable to to us and to our taxpayers ultimately. So.
Great. Good. Well, can I have a motion to let's move this to the full board for review?
So moved.
Support?
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And then we have donation.
And the last item is just a donation approval. As you know, the Voss Foundation provides funding for a lot of programs, and this is just a more specific funding for what is going to be the Ottawa Hills Feeder Pattern Initiative that has been discussed and approved, if you will, internally to move forward on that, and the amount of that donation is about $295,000 from the DeVos Foundation to fund that.
Great. Any questions? We thank all the donors involved and motion to accept the donation.
So moved. Support.
And all in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. This motion passed, or donation accepted as well.
Great. We're into the report section then. The first is September financial statements, which for this fiscal year is the first set of financials where school is actually in session. So being early, it's still, difficult. There's still a lot of trends are developing. The one thing I will point out, I'm looking at the dashboard statement I send to you. The only thing of maybe of significance through September, especially as you compare it to the prior year, is our health benefit line. It's about double at this point as what it was last year. That's related to a couple of issues. One, as you may recall, you approved increase of the full hard cap rate. That took effect July 1st. So the impact of the additional expense to the district is reflected in that health benefit number. We also changed the accounting, the benefit year actually changed a couple of years back. I'll talk a little bit more about this at our work session with respect to the audited financial statements. So that change in accounting also resulted in some additional expense being recognized earlier in the year as compared to prior year. But we will be tracking, in spite of that, we'll still be tracking on a yearly basis our health benefit budget based on the change in the hard cap and the enrollment. Although it'll be adjusted somewhat, we have open enrollment right now. Come July 1st, there may be some change in terms of people changing plans. So we may have to make some adjustment to the hard cap at that point in time to make sure we're not over the statutory hard cap amounts by the end of the year. So that's the only thing of significance that are really in the financial statements monthly basis. Everything else is tracking well. As you know, we get our property tax payments in the summertime, so we're cash flush. We did get our first state aid payment for the year about a week ago, and we'll continue to get that on a monthly basis over the next several months, remainder of the year actually. So any questions on the financials? Okay.
I do have one question, well, a couple.
Yeah.
So recognize the expenses earlier. We don't need a lot of clarity now, but I suspect the full board, the meeting tonight, that will be helpful just to explain that.
We'll talk, it's basically an accounting
Right.
issue. In terms of cash flow, doesn't really change our cash flow except for the increase in the hard caps, but it's an accounting change, so that changes what we account for during the year. The general fund is essentially, and what you see on a monthly basis, without getting too technical, is essentially cash, we call a cash basis. So recognize revenue when the actual cash comes in, recognize expense when we actually pay it out. The accounting for the general fund is essentially, it's technically a modified cash basis. So at year end, for our audited financial statements, we do make some adjustments to reflect that modified cash basis, which is a little bit different than a cash basis, but during the year, what you see is primarily a cash basis. So on a month-to-month basis, there could be some differences in what's recognized just based on timing of when we pay things. And then we true it up essentially at the end of the year. So that's, again, the health benefit doesn't really impact us cash-wise, but accounting-wise, it just looks different.
Right, yeah, And then you said that we would be over the statutory hard cap or potentially could
Well,
be?
you know, we have to, the hard cap, even though it's on a specific plan basis, as you know, single, double, family, at the end of any year, you look at the aggregate amount, and the comparison is the aggregate amount of statutory hard cap based on your employees and the plans they took versus what you actually spent. And so it gets complicated when we have, what did I say before, 90-plus different health plan options. And what's also included in the hard cap, we just have to make sure at the end of the year we haven't spent more on the hard cap. We're not over the hard cap because then there's a penalty for that. So we haven't been so far, but and benefits takes a look at that. Although there has been some transition in the benefit area for the last few months, so we'll have to pay closer attention to it this year to make sure we're well in line where we need to be. So we didn't have as much of a problem prior to this because we were below the hard cap. So we actually had a lot of space, if you will. But now that we're up to the statutory hard caps, we got to watch a little more carefully to make sure we're not above that.
And the state would penalize us if we were over.
Federal government does,
Federal
basically,
government.
yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Other questions or comments? Dr. Flores is excused.
Our
He
state does,
emailed
yeah.
me at 1 a.m. and I didn't check my
Okay.
email this morning. So the record reflects.
There you go.
All right, good. So on to reports.
The warm, safe, and dry and bond reports you have in your packet, and I did start a dashboard summary sheet that goes with each one, just to let you know what's current and open that we're working on. And if there's other information that should go on it, just let me know, and we can expand that.
Great.
For warm, safe, and dry, the Ottawa Hills pool air handling, we have some minor things to wrap up. They aren't affecting the pool operation. But that's still underway, as is the university parking. We are scheduling a follow-up meeting with the neighborhood before we complete that. It's functioning well. We have to finish the landscaping on the north side, that barrier. Frost, which is both a bond and a warm, safe, and dry project, we're in punch list. We met again Friday to finish up things that need to be done. The gym should be open the first week in November. In fact, they should be in painting the floor this morning, gym, and along with the 2 E-Lab classrooms. Wellerwood roof is complete. The Franklin campus heating controls and the data center air conditioning are done. From the bond standpoint, the only projects that we had open were Frost, Colville converting to Frost High School, and then the 111 College. We've got a few very minor things to finish on 111 College, and that's wrapped up. It is open to traffic now. We are monitoring that to make sure that there aren't any other changes we need to make.
Is flow working
operationally.
pretty well?
Yeah, the concept was we would completely separate the bus drop-off into the new drive and keep the parent drop-off in the old drive parking lot and have those separated. We've met out there several times to make sure that we're escorting the students, especially upon leaving through the proper crosswalk, so there's no conflicts, and we'll continue to monitor that. And any questions on any of the projects that are open?
No. Questions?
Do we want to move into the facilities sustainability report?
Sure, yeah, if we're all set with all the other,
All right, well, let me just give some highlight points in there. From a project standpoint, the 2 major projects that were undertaken was, during the last fiscal year, we opened the 6th grade program at the Van Andel Museum site. And then there was major work preparing for the completion for this year's school year, which most of it was in last year, but that was a major project, along with the Colville to Frost conversion. Those were the 2 large projects that we had. Additionally, we did select our architects and construction managers for 6 bond projects to move forward, and we have now started meeting on those. We've started some of our community engagement advisory group meetings, and specifically, our 2 critical ones are Museum High School and Buchanan. Those have fixed timelines to be open September of 18. So those will be our focus. From a sustainability standpoint, a reminder, Kristen Trevelyan, our Green Fellow, completed her 2nd year and is now transitioning as a GRPS employee. We are still one of less than a half a dozen in the country that have a Green Fellow. And one of the items she is still working diligently on is the sustainability plan incorporating into the academic plan, and that's ongoing with our academic team. Some of the things that we wanted to highlight, our maintenance division, one of the things that should be noted, beyond what shows being completed, we are having a difficult time replacing our trade staff as they leave. That is more and more difficult. As it is in the construction industry, we're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, that's why I have a job in the construction industry, trying to get kids excited about the trades, right?
That will be an ongoing issue for us to deal with. We do show in our energy management graph that both our gas and electric costs continue to decline. Part of that is cost of utilities, but part of that is operational too, that we are making significant efforts to manage those. And it is a balance. We're not just turning things off. We still have to make sure that we have the proper comfort levels and we're accommodating all the uses of the building. So it's not as easy as just turning the heat down and saying too bad. We still need to keep people, especially in the classrooms, in a comfort range so they're not distracted as through the teaching learning process. Last year we had 2 charts that had some what looked like anomalies on them with buildings that looked to be inefficient or expensive to use. We tracked those again and to their uses, and they show up again for the most part. And typically, it is the buildings with heavy summer use that show a more expensive cost to operate because there's no downtime. We're running the air full for a 5-day program all summer long, and that's where it's showing up. One other one that shows that it's less efficient is this administrative campus, and part of that is we can't divide out the buildings. We're all in 1 meter. So it shows up together. So while we may close down Campus Elementary for the summer, it really doesn't have an effect because the administrative buildings are still running full board throughout the summer. Those buildings continue to show up that way. We talked about the Franklin campus was a new control system, as was Frost. And one of the highlights of Frost was that is our first building that it has 100% LED lights. There's a chart again showing the cost of energy for vacant buildings. 2 of the buildings have offers on them that are pending. And then on the 3rd Ridgemore, we were working to reopen for next fall. But you can see that there's quite a variance on the cost for a vacant building, some depending on age, how it's used, and how much frequent folks are in and out. But couple of programs that OPS and sustainability put in place. We went to 100% available recycling in every building. There's a recycling receptacle in every classroom, and we put the responsibility for collecting onto the operations team. There are still some schools where the students choose to be involved, but that's school by school. We have a recycling dumpster. Parallel to that, our sustainability group, Kristen, implemented at 4 buildings pilots for composting. And we're monitoring that to see how we can expand it. Is it something that will work at every building, or are there certain things that cause it to work? It is at, if I have them, Frost, City, I'm missing two, and Coit. We are monitoring that. We have implemented green cleaning, working with the operations department to test and then purchase green cleaning products. That will actually be something we can claim as we look at trying to achieve LEED on our construction projects, that we have green cleaning in place. And then Kristen has worked through West Michigan Environmental Action Council, excuse me, and Kent County Recycling for field trips and assembly presentations on environmental programs that they have in place.
Could you talk more about the operations in terms of the custodians doing the recycling? And I know it has been a significant issue at City that
Well,
they weren't being held accountable to do the job that they were supposed to. So recycling wasn't happening from the spring until now. And so are there any controls in place to start to look at that? I know we were going to have people sort of doing, the interns were going to do some observations on certain dumpsters and checking tipping, how much was capacity, but I know that at City it wasn't happening at all, and what are we going to do in terms of holding them accountable from an administrative level?
Kristen, can you help me with that? We did, the transition was the directive to have operations do all the collection.
Right. It didn't happen, and my daughter's the president of the E-Club, and she had a broken clavicle, and she was dragging those things out to the street. So in the spring, and of course she wouldn't let me say anything, so it didn't happen that it got changed.
Yeah.
But there was a meeting.
Sure.
And I did notify the principal earlier on, but it seems that it's an interface that it has to be somebody from operations or facilities holding that staff, because
Sure.
they don't exactly answer to the principal at the building.
Right. Yeah, so at City, we've actually had maybe a more difficult time transitioning our recycling program than we have throughout the rest of the district.
That's good to hear.
You wouldn't expect it because we already had perhaps one of the strongest recycling programs at City to begin with, but I think because there was already an ingrained recycling culture and practice in place, that it was actually, instead of just putting in a new program that had, from scratch, that hadn't been there before, so there wasn't an old way of doing things, it was actually more difficult to change behaviors and responsibilities for everyone at City because they were already doing a lot of work for recycling. So that's been one of our most challenging schools in the district. So it's not representative of the rest of the district.
Good to hear.
I'm sorry to hear about the unfortunate having to drag the carts out. Yes, so it's been brought to my attention this school year a couple weeks ago, and we discussed with our custodial staff what the confusion was and why this was still happening. And I think it happened because we came out pretty strong in the beginning of spring, with training, professional development for all of our custodial staff, saying this is now part of your responsibility. This is how we're doing it. This is, to monitor for contamination. This is, we went through the whole steps with them. And then I think it wasn't as clearly transitioned with the students that were already collecting the carts. And so I think the custodial staff went back and said, oh, okay, well, they're still kind of doing that, so I'm not going to do that then. And then the students students realized that they weren't supposed to do it, so they stopped doing it, and there was a miscommunication there, and some, I think the students then decided they weren't going to do it anymore, which was appropriate. But the custodial staff had seen that they were starting to do it, and so they were unclear, and so it was kind of those two messages kind of missing each other there. And so now that we've identified that, we have spoken with our custodial staff and our head operations supervisor about that. There actually will be a communication going out this week to all of our custodians, not just at City, just to make sure and head off any other potential miscommunications if there are other schools about what the roles are of students and of our custodial staff and what the responsibilities are. And particularly at City, I met with the E-Club, I think 2 weeks ago now, and we talked about how they should, they said they were still sometimes putting them out. They were still collecting recycling and aggregating them on each floor. Then they were collecting from the classrooms and putting them on carts on each floor. And so we talked about just not doing that any longer because that sends a confusing message. I know that their heart is in the right place and they see it not being done, and so they're trying to fill in that gap then. But I think it's, sending some mixed messages there. So we've talked about them not doing that. And then if they want to participate in our recycling program, because I know that they were so active before and it's a passion of theirs, that they can work with me to do some waste audits, and we can do some visual inspections and things like that too. That would actually really help us, so we can identify what are our most common contaminants. Are all of our bins contaminated? Just a few central ones? Do we need to work on messaging? Things like that. So I think we're getting
Good,
through it.
great.
So I'm
Yeah.
optimistic that we'll have this worked out.
Good, good. And that's great to hear that in most buildings it's going well.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Any other? No. All right.
Those are the highlights of
Yeah.
the report. We did add in Appendix A, where we do the energy use and cost for each building. We've also added a calculation, not only cost per student, but cost per student based on maximum capacity. Just to give a comparison, that cost really doesn't change whether we're full or half full, and give you a feel for what the difference is when our buildings fill up.
See that report.
We'll take any questions. If you'd like a chance to go over it in more detail and bring it back to next month's meeting for more discussion, we're open to whatever the committee desires.
Did you guys have any particular?
No.
I noticed it said that the Green Revolving Fund is going to be moving forward. It's going to be explored.
Yeah, so one of the major barriers, I think, as you can imagine, to having Green Revolving Fund is just seed funding. So how do we start funding this, right off the bat, and where do we get that investment from? And that's obviously challenging for the district. And so it's been my focus for the past, year, looking for the low-hanging fruit, so to say, especially with our energy projects, because they typically have a return, whereas, we might be spending some money on composting, but it doesn't quite pay us back very quickly. So looking at our energy projects that would have the greatest payback and be able to maybe pay into or start a revolving loan fund. And so one project or opportunity that we've looked at over the past year, and we haven't, it was kind of been put on the back burner for a few months, but we'll be re-looking at that, is a computer shutdown program. We need to, I think the barrier there is just finding a software program that fits our needs, or one that we can do internally that will fit our needs, but really is no or very, very low cost to the district, but could yield a couple $100,000 in savings annually. And so that is kind of been the pinpointed project. It's like I said, no low cost capital infusion, and then just reaping the savings there. So hopefully being able to put that project in place would be able to set up a system by which we could capture savings and document it. Of course, that's a very easily documentable savings. We want to make sure everyone's comfortable that with how we're measuring that, when we're transferring dollars from one account to another, everyone wants to be very certain that the savings are there, it's measured and verified and accountable. So I think that's an excellent project to kind of seed that funding.
Yeah, great. Anything else? I was very impressed, and thank you very much for
Yeah.
putting in all this time and
It's a great report.
energy into our report, because I think it's very helpful for everyone to understand. And good. And yeah, we can always have some more questions next time, maybe. Just bring it up. Dr. Flores wants to bring any questions next time.
And one quick thing on the bond updates. I know the community piece has been so important to the board at large. Is there a way to document the schools that are in process where those meetings have happened, where we're either doing the advisory meetings or the committee meetings, just so we can see it on paper, so we understand?
Yes, I can add that to the dashboard with the
Great.
dates, what we've had and what is
I
in
think
planning.
that would be perfect.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, are we recycling our scrap on projects? It's just an idea for how to accumulate some funds.
We have identified in all the architectural and construction management contracts that it is our intent to attain lead for the projects if possible, and if not, follow lead practices. And recycling of construction materials is one of those.
Right.
On the lead checklist, it's on there. So we will follow that irregardless.
Okay.
Now, some of our buildings, Chris and I have been working on this because going round and round. Some are relatively easy to attain, or easier than others, and especially the renovation projects are larger challenges. But we're working diligently to find ways to pursue lead on those. If not, we're still going to follow lead practice.
Sure. Yeah, I'm thinking more about the scrap metal, if there's a way to capture that and then receive funds back.
Typically, anything that's part of demolition, that goes into the bidding process for demolition. So we don't get that directly back,
Yeah.
but it's a net in their
Right.
bid.
Okay.
And it's identified that we expect them to recycle it.
Yeah.
And realistically, the bidder who does recycle is going to have the lower bid.
Right. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else? Good. Okay, well, we got done sooner than I thought we would. Wonderful. So there is a meeting this afternoon at 5:30.
5:30.
Yes. I won't be there, but enjoy and meeting adjourned. Good. And then
Adjourn?
our meeting is adjourned, yes.
Very good.